Okay, so with absolutely no apologies, I'm going to start by introducing my co-hosts. The reason I'm doing that is because if you are new to my channel, you will soon discover that they do tend to pop up in my channel a bit. The little blonde chihuahua at the front here, on the left-hand side, Amira, you are probably going to hear her snoring quite often because she snores really, really loudly. You may also hear noises of a pup playing with noisy toys. That's Mouse. That's the little one in the background. He's got a few noisy toys. He also periodically likes to bark at Amira or Taka to try and get them to play with him when he's in a really rowdy mood. Occasionally, his little cousin, who is a week older than him, is here, in which case I find myself babysitting two chihuahua pups, and you will hear a little bit of craziness in the background. On the right hand side is my big dog Taka. You won't hear so much from her. You may hear a slightly more mellow snoring occasionally. You may also hear a scrabbling noise in the background, which is basically her walking across the floor because I've got wooden floorboards and she doesn't know how to walk quietly. The other thing you may frequently hear is her munching away on dog biscuits because she loves her bickies. Now, if you're lucky, you may also hear what sounds like an alarm clock in the background occasionally. It's not an alarm clock. I can't turn it off. It's a minor bird whose number one sound in its repertoire is the alarm clock. Okay, let's focus back in on this video. First of all, a quick shout out to all my new subscribers. Welcome to my channel. And to those of you who are new and haven't yet subscribed to my channel, if you like what you see, please subscribe. That is the best way of supporting my channel, and it's free. Basically, in terms of how things work on YouTube, the best way you can support a channel that you like is to make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the like button as soon as you go into their videos and leave comments. These are the things that result in YouTube then recommending those videos to more viewers. Bringing in more viewers, more subscribers helps the channel grow, helps the channel to continue. So definitely, if you feel that, if you're questioning, am I giving enough support? If you're hitting like, if you're leaving comments, if you're subscribed, that's the best support you can give to any channel. So, moving on from that. Now, with yesterday's video, we left off at a point where things are just about to get serious for Jen. Detective O'Malley is just about to lay it all out for her and point out to her what the consequences are for a person who obstructs an investigation. Making it clear that if Jen is obstructing the investigation, this is what's in her future. So let's jump in and take it from there.
Like I told you, there's going to come to a point where we will. Right? Volusia County Sheriff's Office just found somebody the other day that's been missing for a long time. People get found. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not quick. I'm hoping this situation is today, tomorrow, Sunday, but we will find her. What you need to think about is when we find her, is there an opportunity or a chance that we are going to prove that you did not assist us to your full capability in this investigation? And if that is true, you need to think about the consequences of that. Consequences of hindering a murder investigation or a capital sexual battery investigation could be punishable up to probably the same charges, the same time in jail. I know you know that I don't believe what you're saying, and I know you know that I think you prioritize Stefan, but you prioritize jail. You see what I'm saying? Like, if we come back and prove that you sat in this room and misled us, that you didn't lead us in the right direction, or that you assisted, or you acknowledged, or you knew, you're gonna need warning from jail.
If I knew anything, I swear I would tell you. I know nothing. He hasn't mentioned. We haven't discussed this. I had no suspicion of anything. He did not tell me any more details of where he went that day other than those shops that I had mentioned. I'm giving you my truth.
Now, he's already said to Jen basically that he believes that she thinks that they won't find Maddie, and if they don't find Maddie, then Stefan won't get charged. And now, having established that, he basically he goes hardline. We will find her. Not a if we find her, but we will find her. He's making it clear to Jen, we're not messing around. We're not going to stop, and we will find Maddie. And he points out to Jen what that means for her. If there is a chance that we prove that you didn't assist us to your full capability, these are the consequences. You could be facing the same charges as Stearns. You could be spending the same amount of time in jail. So he's well and truly signalling here that it's time for Jen to stop lying and actually start telling the truth, unless she wants to end up being locked up herself. Now, I think based on the progression of her response, that she was probably first of all a little bit shocked by that, and it took her a moment or two to process what was actually being said to her, because she starts off with that little voice that she puts on, and she goes back to her usual objection of, if I knew anything, I swear I would tell you. But you actually can hear there is fading facts here. By the time she gets to I will tell you, it is definitely quieter. Is this the tone that you would expect to hear from an innocent parent who is just relying on law enforcement to find their child? Someone who truly does know nothing and is truly innocent? Because she's said nothing here that makes me think that she's innocent. There's no anger in her voice. There's no, how can you accuse me of this when my child is missing? Or, well, I'm so glad that you believe you can find my child. Now stop harassing me and get out there and do your job. None of that. She's not actually, she doesn't appear to have any anger or objection to the fact that he's saying you're lying. Her brain hasn't actually registered the fact that this is something she should be objecting to because she's supposed to be acting innocent. So there's no objection, no reaction. All we get is these reassurances. I swear I would tell you. But even after adding that little bit of emphasis with I swear, she's not going to stop there. She has to convince them now that I know nothing, don't look at me. But the problem is she's having trouble getting the words out. She starts with he hasn't mentioned, And then she stops. And then in a louder voice, she says, "We haven't discussed this." Now, what I find interesting about that is that this is not the first time that she's said to them, essentially, that we haven't discussed this, meaning we haven't discussed Maddie's location. And because each time she does it, she has less of an affected voice. There's no pauses when she's saying it. I think she's actually telling the truth here. Now, you've probably heard my theory that Jen directed him to Lake Lizzy in terms of where to take Maddie. Because basically we have him on a road that's less than a mile from Jen's friend's place. And if you were to follow that road through, you would end up at Lake Lizzy. And we know that he basically reached a point where he couldn't drive anymore because the tyre was completely shredded on that car. So I think many of us believe that had he been able to, he would have continued to drive to his intended location. So I honestly believe that Jen is extremely manipulative and extremely cunning. So I suspect that when mention was made of his flat tyre, whether or not that meant that he also mentioned that that's where he left Maddie, I suspect that Jen may have intentionally chosen to end the conversation there so that she could object. Because she honestly sounds a little bit more genuine there when she says, "We haven't discussed this." But then she shoots herself in the foot because she turns around and said, "I had no suspicions of anything. He didn't tell me," and then she pauses again. Okay, well, Jen, you've just had this long conversation here where, having been backed into a corner and asked what you know and why you didn't question him, you've given a list of things that, in your words, were suspicious AF. I can't say it in full because YouTube doesn't like that. So, only a short while after telling them all these things that in her mind were suspicious, now she's saying she had no suspicions of anything. Well, that's not a good thing to throw in here when you're trying to convince detectives that you know nothing about what happened to your daughter. You know nothing about what he did to your daughter or where he took your daughter. Not when you've already established a list of things that you have decided are suspicious. Now, going back to, she says, "He didn't tell me," and you get this long pause. And she finishes the sentence with, "Any more details of where he went that day, other than those shops that I mentioned?" I can't help wondering if she was about to slip up here and say, "He didn't tell me where he took her," and then thought about it and thought, "I need to say this in a way that's not going to incriminate me," because by saying he didn't tell me where he took her is sort of acknowledging really that she knew that he took her somewhere, but he just didn't tell her. So then she changes tack and says, "Any more details of where he went that day?" She's acknowledging that there were more details in terms of where he went that day. That could just be an innocent comment. But when you put it all together, when you look at the way that she pauses before she can say any more details, it makes me think she's being very careful with her words and she's being very careful to avoid saying something. And then you get this long pause and she says, I'm giving you my truth. That's a really, really odd way of putting it. I could imagine someone saying, I'm being honest. I'm telling you everything I know. But I'm giving you my truth. It's really just a step away from my version of the story. When you qualify it as my truth, you're essentially saying, that's the truth according to me, but it may not be the truth according to other people. It is only my truth. It is only my version of the truth. Now, yeah, obviously, we all have our own versions of the truth. But we don't qualify that. If we believe we are being honestly truthful, we're not going to say it's my truth. We're going to say it's the truth. I swear I'm giving you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. I'm being honest. Not, I swear I'm giving you my truth. Now, if she had said this, giving you the truth, and actually sounded a little bit pissed off with them over their repeated questions, maybe I could believe that she was actually telling the truth here. But I'm not convinced.
On any of the days that he came home after these suspicious outings, 192 trips, Northport trips, and everything else, did he change clothes? Did he come home and appear disheveled, sweaty, dirty?
I don't believe he showered. He didn't bring that many changes of clothes with him, so I know he's repeated his outfit over and over. It's possible he could have come home all sweaty and disheveled after the supposed changing the tire thing, but I wasn't home to see that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I didn't see him come home dirty or sweaty or anything like that.
So Detective O'Malley is asking her about a change of clothes, if he looked dishevelled at any point, if he was sweaty, if he was dirty, after any of these outings that occurred. And straight away, you can hear the change of tone in Jen's voice. I think it's finally sunk in. She's had her little objection after being told, if we can prove it, you're going down. She's had that little whiny voice, and now it's down to business. She knows that they don't buy her whiny voice, so she's just completely tossed it out. She's not going to pretend anymore to be all upset, all affected, because it's not suiting her needs. It's not allowing her to achieve her goal. So now suddenly we get Jen's relatively normal voice. I don't know if we could call it her normal voice, because she is so manipulative that she changes her voice so often it's hard to know what is exactly her normal voice. But definitely, she's lost the whiny voice. And the first thing she does, they've given her a list of questions, essentially. The change of clothes, dishevelled, sweaty, dirty. But she straight up offers, I don't believe he showered. So she's introduced this little nugget of information herself. She's offered this up straight up. This is important for her. Why is it significant? I'm not quite sure. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. We do know that in, I think, the derivative use interview, when she's asked if he showered while he was there, she says yes, because there was a strange towel in the bathroom. So I don't know if her trying to claim I don't believe he showered is specifically referring to after Stefan's outings, because that was the qualifier to the question here that the detective was asking, or if this was just a response to the whole time he was there. In which case, she's probably doing her best to make him look like a slob. Once again, let's make Stefan look like a bad person here so that I can put my halo back on and you're not going to focus on me anymore. And then she goes on to say, well, he didn't bring many clothes. And she says, well, it's possible that he was sweaty and dishevelled after changing the tyre, but I wasn't home to see that. But other than that, I didn't see him come home dirty or sweaty or anything. Well, here's the thing. She would know if he changed clothes after the incident with the tyre, because she saw him just before he left. And then she saw him later on when he turned up at Yolanda's office. So she should know if he was wearing the same clothes. Also, in terms of being sweaty and dishevelled, well, she says, I don't believe he had a shower. So you're telling me that when he turned up at Yolanda's office, there was no body odour, there was no sign of dirt on his face from maybe touching his face while changing a tyre? Didn't observe any of that stuff, Jen? She's being very matter of fact, but I do have questions. Basically, all she's doing here is separating herself from Stefan's actions. I don't believe he showered. Meaning, if he showered, well, I'm not going to say for certain whether that occurs or not. I'm just going to say I don't believe. Not he definitely didn't shower, or yes, I know he showered because there was a strange bath towel in my bathroom. And again, talking about, well, it's possible that he came back sweaty and dishevelled after changing the tyre, but I wouldn't know that because I wasn't there. That's just, one step away from the, I don't know anything because I was asleep. This time round, she can actually claim that she wasn't there and ignore the fact that she should be aware of whether or not he had changed clothes before turning up at Yolanda's. So definitely, as much as she is trying to show that she knew nothing here, she's adding those little qualifiers with each thing that she says. She doesn't believe he showered, meaning that if he did shower and they can prove he showered, it's just that she didn't think he did, not saying he definitely didn't. Again, if he came back sweaty and dishevelled, well, I'm just telling you that I wasn't there, so I don't know. And I didn't look at him afterwards. I didn't stand next to him afterwards when we were at Yolanda's office telling the officers that Maddie was missing. But honestly, the biggest red flag for me here is the sudden change in demeanour. She's been told, basically, you can end up being arrested, you can end up going to jail. And straight away, we get this change in demeanour. This proves how manipulative she is for anyone who believes that Jen's just a victim. I mean, if Jen was a victim and she was being manipulated by Stearns, how do you explain this complete turnaround as soon as the detectives basically give her a serious warning?
Did he do anything he normally doesn't do within the house around you?
No. No. He was acting very normal, sitting on the computer chair, chatting away with me, talking about not resetting his phone, updating his phone.
So, obviously, at this point in time, the detectives have spoken to the flatmates. So they know that he was doing a load of washing during the day, which is not something that he normally does. They also know that he had power tools out, and he was doing something with power tools. And they know that in terms of that, there was a conversation between Jen and Stefan. Now, I can't remember exactly, I would have to go back to the flatmates' interviews, but it was something along the lines of Jen was asking him what he was doing, and he said that he was doing that project that he told her about. Which sounds very vague, very much code for, you know what I'm doing, but we can't discuss it in front of the flatmate. So when he says, did he do anything he normally doesn't do? When Detective O'Malley asks this, he knows what the right answer is. But what does Jen do? You get this long pause. Obviously, part of that is she doesn't want to answer. Part of that is she's processing how to answer it, how to tackle this question without saying the wrong thing. So she says no, and then she repeats it, but it's even softer. Which, if she genuinely believed no, then I could expect a tentative no with a bit of reflection and like, yeah, no, you know, a more assertive no. Not a quieter no. So she's backing off from this question already. So what does she do? She reverts to the narrative. Clearly, in her mind, that's the safest option, the safest road to go down. So we get there, he was acting normal, just chatting away, talking about resetting his... Oh, not resetting his phone, updating his phone. Boy, did she trip up there. And not just because of the accidentally saying he was talking about resetting his phone. But if we were having a conversation about this case, and we were to talk about that particular period of time, we could talk about the conversation that occurred between Jen and Stefan where he said that he reset his phone, or where he said that he accidentally reset his phone. She could have actually got away with saying, talking about resetting his phone, in the context of that did actually get mentioned as part of that conversation of, I reset my phone and I don't know how I did it. But instead, she makes herself look guilty. Instead of, if she was just innocently thinking, you know, this conversation I already told you about, the one where he reset his phone, then she wouldn't even miss a beat and keep talking. But she realises that it's the wrong thing to say, it's incriminating, and changes it to not resetting his phone, updating his phone. Had the conversation that she's sharing here been genuinely a reflection of what occurred, then in her brain there would have been no alarm at mentioning him talking about resetting his phone, and she would simply go on to clarify what she meant. But the alarm bells went off because that's not the conversation that should have occurred. So it's a double whammy here. Not only does she blurt out about the conversation of resetting his phone, but she shows that awareness of it being an admission of guilt by backtracking. I'm not sure if I've quite explained that fully. But then, what do we get? We get the Soto sigh, and she goes silent. She doesn't know where to go from that, because she's tried to establish, well, he was just acting normal, doing all these normal things. She's tripped up, spoken about resetting the phone, but instead of treating it like, well, that's exactly what the conversation was about, and let me clarify what I mean here, instead doing the OF, I shouldn't have said that response. And then you get silence, 38 seconds, where she's sitting there silent because she can't think of anything else to give an example, as an example, of him acting normal. I suspect that the other reason for that long silence there is her working through the other things that did occur during that day, trying to decide if she can put a normal spin on any of them so that she can sound helpful. In other words, the doing stuff with power tools, the doing a load of washing. And I do believe that she knew that he did a load of washing. Admittedly, he had like a 2 and a bit hour block when he got back to the townhouse after she had left to apparently pick up Maddie, where he could have done some washing. And then he went to Yolanda's, and he didn't get there till a bit after 5. So, yeah, feasibly, he could have done a load of washing, and Jen wasn't there to observe him doing it. But the thing is, we have an account from one of the flatmates who says that when Jen contacted her and said Maddie's missing, one of the things she did was go into Maddie's fake bedroom. And she noticed this big pile of blankets and stuff on Maddie's bed, which she thought was very odd. So, to me, I keep thinking, were those things that were piled in Maddie's bed, is that what Stefan washed? And he didn't have time to do anything else with them, or he didn't know what to do with them, so he dumped them on Maddie's bed. Well, if that's the case, how could Jen not notice that? She went into the room earlier in the day and collected Maddie's phone. So if those blankets weren't all piled up like that then, and then she went back into Maddie's room later on, she would have to notice. Which would surely lead to a conversation between Stefan and her about, well, why are all these blankets piled up like this? Where did they come from? But she doesn't bring them up at all here with the detectives. And sure, we could turn around and say, well, maybe she just didn't go back into Maddie's fake room. But that still looks bad for her. Your daughter's missing, and you finished doing a report with police, and you just come home and just get into the recreational side of things, and you don't go back into her bedroom and look. You don't go into her bedroom just for a sense of closeness.
Did he carry tools in his car to change a tire, typically?
I think he said there was a tire iron in the car and the jack.
Did he bring it inside? Did he leave it in the car? After?
I think he left everything was in the car.
So they didn't get the answer they wanted from her, so they give her a prompt. And they give her a prompt in a way that doesn't show that they know what they know, but still gives her the opportunity to tell the truth here. So instead of tackling it with, well, your flatmate said that he had tools in the house, they bring up tools in the context of the car and asks if he might have brought those tools into the house. He's giving her a huge opportunity here to actually tell the truth. And again, she knows nothing. She saw nothing.
Did you ever go look at his car? To verify that he changed his tire?
I don't think I did.
Never dawned on you to go double check. Except by the time he would have got back from the tire, you were gone, right?
Yeah.
What he told us?
Yeah.
And then she was reported missing
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah.
And it never dawned on you to be like, damn, did he really change his tire? Let me double check.
No. We got home really late that evening and I didn't even think of doing that.
This is part of our problem. You did so many things and you never questioned it.
Now, obviously, there's a pretty good chance that they didn't have the cell towers information at that point in time. Those sort of things take a bit longer, you've got to get warrants, etc. But the data that we now have from those cell towers shows us that her and Stefan pretty much drove in tandem when they returned to the townhouse from Yolanda's. So it's just really interesting that she's claiming here, I never checked about this tyre. Because even if you didn't check, you arrived back at the townhouse at pretty much the same time as him, so you didn't notice the car then either. So to actually turn around and say, we got back pretty late and I didn't think about it, just seems to be a little bit unconvincing. And he's not convinced either because he puts it back on her. He did all these things and you never questioned them. So he's showing her that he's still not buying her story. He's showing her that he knows she's still hiding information.
I didn't suspect him.
How can we believe some of the stuff that you're telling us, or believe that you don't know?
I don't know how to say it. I mean, I guess I'm stupid and gullible and very trustworthy, but I didn't think he'd be the type to do anything like this. I didn't doubt.
So she's reverted back to that voice a little bit with, I didn't suspect him. Because now she needs to try the helpless, vulnerable act again. Because she's screwed up in terms of talking about resetting the phone, how to get around that. Look at me, I'm helpless, I'm vulnerable, I'm just a poor little weak person who's done nothing wrong. And then they ask her, how can we believe you? And she actually tries emotional manipulation on them. The sort of emotional manipulation that is reserved for someone that you are close to. When you want to make them feel bad about essentially calling you out on something. It is a classic narcissistic move. You've been called out, you've been caught in the act, so there's plenty of options you've got, and you've tried a bunch of your arsenal already, so you go for the emotional manipulation. What does she do? She says, well, I guess I'm stupid and gullible and very trustworthy. And I'll come back to that very trustworthy in a minute. But basically, she's essentially not saying that she believes she's stupid and gullible, etc., but that, well, if you believe this thing, then you're accusing me of being these things, and now you've made me feel really, really bad because look at the way you view me. You're a horrible person because you've made me feel bad and you look at me this way. Top-notch emotional manipulation. But in the effort to do so, she's forgotten that, for starters, these guys aren't anyone who gives a rat's ass about her. So that level of emotional manipulation is obviously not going to work on them. Because they don't care if them saying something is damaging a relationship between them and her, because there's no relationship between them that exists. So there's nothing to be damaged. Because that is at the core of that kind of emotional manipulation. You're basically trying to guilt someone into saying, you've just damaged our relationship. You're trying to guilt them into feeling that they are possibly destroying this emotional connection that exists between you because they are such a horrible person. So she's way, way, way off the mark here. But in her attempt at this whole next level of manipulation, I think that actually was a bit of a leak there. Saying, because I'm stupid and gullible and very trustworthy. Obviously, what she was probably trying to say is very trusting. But instead it comes out as very trustworthy, which in the context of stupid and gullible doesn't fit. And the correct interpretation would be not very trustworthy. So she's actually screwed up here bigger than she realises and admitted that she's not very trustworthy. Because even though she was trying to say something else, her brain sabotaged it. Like I've said several times before, the brain doesn't like to lie. So while she's trying this emotional blackmail here, you know, you're making me feel stupid and gullible, and you're telling me I'm not trustworthy, or that I trust too much, or something like that, she's actually chucked in and very trustworthy. We should have a not in there, based on if you look at the way it flows grammatically. So major mistake there. And then, like I've said, one of the other things that the brain struggles with when you're lying is to actually complete a sentence. And she starts with, I didn't, doesn't know where to go with that. I didn't think he'd be the type to do anything like this. Leaves that up in the air as to like what, Jen? Like the essay stuff, like the unaliving Maddie. And then she tries to double down on that by saying, I didn't doubt, and she couldn't even say the word doubt. Her brain's gone, nope, don't lie. Of course you did. You know, don't say this sentence because it's a lie. She pauses and she goes, and she can't even come up with a sentence at that point in time. It's like her brain has just turned on all the warning bells and gone, don't lie here, they might arrest you. And it's just completely stopped her from saying anything.
But you knew he was vindictive. You described him as not trustworthy with his family. You described instances where you document where he was lying to his family, lying to you, lying to others.
Lying to his family, yes, but lying to me.
You discussed that he wasn't that good of a person. You had to it wasn't this family. You're not describing him in a positive light at all. So this trust, this caring, all this stuff makes no sense because you, regardless of the victimization, describe him as a good person. He's stealing from his parents, right?
But he never stole from me.
You guys have no money, but all he's doing is ordering things, right? He's buying himself things. He's not. You described him as a selfish thief. You even called it a robbery, that he robbed his parents. So you're trusting this dude who you're describing as untrustworthy.
But I thought he was.
So, as to be expected, that little bit of emotional manipulation just completely fell flat. And the detectives, basically, they're not having a bar of any of this crap. So they call her out. They point out to her all the negative things that she's said about Stearns, all the things that show him as a liar, as someone who can't be trusted, as someone who should be questioned. All the negatives that she's said throughout the interview. And point out that what she's saying here doesn't match with that. They're pointing out the absurdity of saying that I trust this person, but you know what? They've stolen from their parents, they've lied to their parents, they're lazy. But you know what? I put them up here on a pedestal, I can't see anything wrong with them. And she starts to object with, But I thought he was, and we don't hear the rest of the sentence, she thought he was something. She was probably going to try and say, well, I thought he wasn't like that with me, or something like that. But she's losing the fight here. The wheels are falling off, and she knows it. But it really says something about her personality, doesn't it? That even after these warnings, if you continue to obstruct us, you could end up in jail also. You could end up being locked away as long as he is. Even after all that, she's still trying to manipulate. She's still trying to lie. She's still not giving the truth. This to me says this is something that is so ingrained in her that she can't see any chance of failure. Which is ironic, because by this stage they've had her for 2.5 hours, and they have, each time she has tried her tactics, they've basically shown her, no thanks, we're not buying that. So she's still going.
What happened to her? Where did you ask that? I can't fathom that. I can't wrap my head around that.
I think I only asked him if he took her to school. When I called him and told him to come to the office, I asked him, like, you dropped her off at school, right? Because she never made it. And he said, yeah. And I was like, she never made it. Where did you drop her off?
Honestly, it's like pulling teeth with this woman. They push. They show her that they don't believe her. They show her that they know she's lying. And instead of just going, okay, let me speak now, she just goes a little bit further. And quite often it's just going back to the narrative, or just adding a little bit of extra detail that she thinks will satisfy them. So Detective O'Malley is basically saying, I can't wrap my head around it. I can't fathom it. He's quite calmly telling her that he doesn't believe her. Essentially, the signal here, you need to give us something more right now, because we just cannot buy what you're coming up with. And now she's like, I think I only asked him if he took her to school. I asked, you dropped her off at school, right? Because she never made it. Again with the I think. You should have a pretty clear idea of whether you did or you didn't. When someone says, I think I did it, generally that means, actually, I didn't do it. What she's saying here is, I think I probably should have, if we're talking about a normal situation where I know nothing, I probably should have asked him this. So, I think I only asked him. To me, is actually, no, I didn't even ask him that. And again, we get this language from her of, because she never made it. And then she comes out with the same thing again. She never made it, where did you drop her off? And then she doesn't know where to go with that, so I've got the This is apparently the one thing that she's asked Stefan over the 2 days that she had with him when Maddie was missing. But she only thinks she might have asked him this. So essentially she's admitting there was no conversation between them, even as to where he might have dropped Maddie off. Either she knew that he didn't drop Maddie off anywhere and that's why the conversation didn't occur, or she used one really, really cold, callous, I can't say that word on YouTube, and really couldn't care less if he dropped Maddie off or not. The fact that she keeps going with it, never made it, to me is alarming. And we've discussed that before. You know why it sounds bad. I mean, essentially, she just can't think of what questions would be the normal questions for a parent to ask the last person who saw her child, or what questions would be normal question to ask someone who's doing suspicious things, because those things have never popped into her head. Which, as obvious as that sounds, basically means she's not stopped at all. In all this time that Maddie's been missing, she's not asked any questions about Maddie's disappearance. Explain that one to me, Jen.
You guys sat in your car Tuesday night when I was out there. I was out there at least 4 hours. Just you two in that car.
Yeah.
You can't tell me you guys did not have any conversations about this. There's no way. A reasonable person would have been questioning him. You were the last person with her. What the hell happened this morning? You never did that in that car.
No, I didn't.
So, all along I've been referring to them sitting in that car for 4 hours as like that is the period of time. And I just realised what's going on here. He said, you were sitting in that car for at least 4 hours while I was there. So if you go through the documents, if you go through all the reports, what you see is that basically there was a rotation of officers watching the townhouse that night because it was locked down and they were going to bring forensics in. So he did his sort of rotation for 4 hours and left. So Jen and Stefan were actually in that car for even longer than 4 hours. And now he's putting the pressure on. There is no way that you sat in that car for 4 hours and did not have a conversation about this. And doubling down on that, you never asked him, you were the last person with her, what the heck happened to her. And Jen just comes out with this really quiet no. I mean, how guilty can you look? 4 hours sitting in a car because you are locked out of your apartment while forensics are starting to look at it because your child is missing. 4 hours where you know they've just told him, well, they've just taken his phone. You know they've just told him, don't go back to your car, don't go in your car. Essentially signalling that that's going to be locked down as well. Like any half-wit could figure that out. 4 hours when they've apparently made a phone call to Chris and said, we need a lawyer for Stefan because they're focusing in on him. But not once in that 4 hours did she say, hey, Stefan, why are they focusing on you? What really happened? The detective has got a point. And honestly, I'm just gobsmacked that this woman isn't already locked up.
I remember being on my phone. He was on my phone for a little bit. I know I was medicated. And I was just zoning out. I wasn't thinking anything of anything. I never asked him. Just asking him that one time to me was, if he took her to school, that was enough answer for me. I don't know, I just wanted to not think the worst, I guess. I don't know. But I didn't think he did anything. Now I know. But then I didn't. I was still believing everything he was telling me.
Every time she tries to say that she knew nothing, she didn't suspect anything, she didn't ask any questions, that's when she suddenly has trouble saying full sentences. She cannot complete her thoughts. She's once again gone back to the little voice of hers, and she starts with, I was on my phone, he was on my phone for a while, and then of course the good old Jen fallback. I was medicated. I wasn't thinking anything of anything. You weren't thinking about your missing child. You weren't running through scenarios in your head. Right. And then it takes her forever to spit out that she never asked him. It's like, I never asked him, and she says it so quietly. And the biggest red flag here, that one time was enough answer for me. Really. Your child is missing. You know this guy's a liar. There's a bunch of things that don't add up in his behaviours. And you just ask him the one time, what happened? And he's like, nothing happened, I dropped off at school. And you're satisfied with that? You're not going to keep asking? Find different questions around that same idea to try and get an answer out of him? To try and understand what's going on? That is not normal. If your child is missing and you're there with the last person that you know saw your child, you are going to be seeking reassurance to the point of being obnoxious. You are going to ask them a million different ways where they dropped that child off. If they dropped that child off. Are they certain that's how things happened? Are they being honest? Was there anyone else around that you saw? So many questions. But apparently she only needed to ask him once, and then that was enough. And then again we get these broken sentences. I just wanted to think. No finishing there. We don't know what she just wanted to think. And then not think the worst, I guess. So your child's missing. This guy's the last person to have been with your child. There's no sign of your child. And you're more concerned about not thinking the worst about him than you are with worrying about where your child is. because you would be starting to become so panicked that you probably would start to think the worst. You run through all this in your head. You may even blame him for not dropping her off at the actual school and for dropping her off earlier than usual. But apparently she didn't want to think the worst, so none of that was a problem for Jen. And I thought I heard her say, I still think he did anything. Meaning to say, I still don't think he did anything, but I think she forgot to say don't. Once again, the brain short-circuiting and switching the lie to more of a truth. I still think he did anything. In other words, yeah, I know he did something. The brain can't quite say the full sentence that she's trying to say, so there's that little bit of guilty leakage. And then she claims that, oh, now I know, but, back then I didn't. And we lose the sentence again. I was still believing everything he was telling me. She is still protesting. And she's still making it so hard for these detectives. Lying outright to them, or trying to lie outright to them, but she can't finish her sentences. And when she does finish her sentences, there's these little guilty leakages that happen here and there. I still think he did anything. And then hearing all this, I see this post from Greg Hughes on Facebook, basically saying that those of us who believe that Jen is more than just a victim are essentially morons. And that basically she's just another one of Stearns' victims and she's not to be blamed in this and she didn't know anything. Well, she sure as hell sounds guilty to me.
Juvenile robbery suspects utilize the excuse of, I was high on bars, I took Xanax, I was blacked out. Right? Every juvenile robbery suspect you interview, I was, in your words, medicated, in their words, high, incapacitated, drunk. It's an excuse to avoid admitting what happened. When you say you're medicated, I can't think of an amount of medication that will numb you so bad to numb the fact that the investigation is occurring right in front of your face for your missing. So being medicated is just an excuse to avoid answering why you didn't discuss with him what happened. It minimizes your guys' interaction by saying you were not fully coherent. But there's a person I know who can sit in a car and watch a bunch of detectives and crime scene investigators and everybody else search her house, seize her house, and be so numb that somehow is not ringing bells, is not overcoming the power of this little medication. There's no way. The human body will overcome that in a big situation. You didn't take enough medication to numb you of the reality of what was occurring.
I mean,
there's no way. Unless you were fully incapacitated, there's no way you were so numb that everything he described to you, everything I described to you was not in the forefront of your mind. You weren't numb. Just like these robbery kids weren't blacked out. They weren't high enough to not remember the robbery. They just don't want to talk about it.
no, it wasn't clicking. It didn't click to me. Like you guys telling me like it wasn't as obvious, like this and that. I still believed the story he had told me, that when we were sitting in the car, I still fully believed everything he had told me. I didn't doubt him. I really thought you guys were going after the wrong guy. I'm like, they're wasting time. The real suspect is out there. She's being sex trafficked. That was my biggest fear, is that she was being sex trafficked. I didn't think that she would actually be dead.
So he calls her out on the medication thing, basically pointing out that you would have to be completely incapacitated not to have all this at the forefront of your mind, not to notice everything that's going on under your nose, and not have questions about it. So she then goes from being a zombie who was so medicated that she couldn't even think to fumbling her way around to basically object and say it wasn't clicking, and going back to her same old in terms of thinking it was just an abduction. He's backed her into a corner. Her choices are to turn around and say, I lie, I did suspect him and I asked him questions, but obviously she's not going to admit she was a liar. So she goes back to the fallback story. I still thought it was an abduction. There's all these things right under my nose. Everything is pointing to Stefan. I'm even turning around and saying that he needs a lawyer. Because I can recognise that everything is pointing to Stefan, I can see that detectives are looking really closely at him. But I'm going to ignore all this evidence that's right under my nose and instead go back to the abduction theory. She's so unbelievable. She has lied throughout this entire interview. She's been given this warning. You could end up going to jail. And she doesn't care. She's still scrabbling to save her ass. And instead of coming clean, instead of saying, well, this is where I think Maddie might be, this, or saying, this is the conversation we've had, she's just going to keep lying. As a parent whose child is missing, you would expect her to be grabbing for the most obvious answers. But she's looking at the most obvious answers and apparently disregarding them. It's glaring her in the face, and supposedly she still believed that Maddie had been abducted.
But she thought enough to get him a lawyer.
I really thought you guys were going after the wrong guy.
At that point, from the jump, we've been trying to find her. That has been and will be our biggest priority.
Him getting arrested for victimizing her was an accident. We only discovered that she was a victim because we took his phone.
And I'm like so happy that happened, because if not, this would have continued to keep happening.
Well, it wouldn't have, because he killed her on Monday.
Talking about if she had been found. I don't know why.
Okay, so there are expectations that are placed on us within society in terms of how we are supposed to react in particular situations. So, hypothetically, let's say one of your work colleagues is a real narcissist. They perhaps take credit for other people's work. Maybe they are passive aggressive in the way they talk to you. They're just not someone very nice. And they get given a promotion. Now, it's not really acceptable to turn around and say in your workplace, this person is such a a biatch, that they don't deserve this promotion, they steal everyone else's work, they're such a horrible person. Because that comes back on you. It's just not socially acceptable. So instead, you gush about, oh wow, I feel so happy for them that they got this promotion. You know, they clearly have been recognised for the work they've done. And it's so disingenuous. But it's just kind of what's expected. And that's what Jen's doing here. They've just called her out for wanting to get him a lawyer. And she tries with, well, I really thought you guys were going after the wrong person. Which is a miss. Doesn't work with them. So then they remind her that the priority here is finding Maddie. It's a bit of a jab at her, basically. Maddie should be your first thought, not Stefan. And then they point out that all this CSAM stuff, that him being arrested for that, was essentially accidental. They stumbled onto it on his phone. Now, having already been called out for wanting to get him a lawyer as opposed to actually questioning him, all that sort of stuff, she's trying to get points here. And her idea of getting points is when they talk about the stuff that was on his phone, to say, I'm so glad that happened, because if not, that would have continued to keep happening. Epic fail, Jen. Epic fail. Sure, could say, well, I'm so glad that happened because he deserves to be dealt with over this. But even that we know is not genuine, because she wanted to get him a lawyer over the CSAM stuff. But to say that the reason she's glad about it is because otherwise it would have continued to keep happening, when she knows full well that her daughter is missing and, according to detectives, almost certainly deceased. So she's tried to say what she thinks they expect her to say. They brought up the fact that they got him banged to rights on this stuff, and she thinks, well, clearly the decent thing to say would be to say that I'm glad that that happened. And I want to see him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But her brain doesn't quite go the right way. If not, this would have continued to keep happening. The fact that she says that after I'm so glad that happened shows quite clearly that she's not actually glad that he was arrested for those things. That backed up with the fact that she wanted to get him a lawyer. And thankfully the detective pulls her up on that straight away. No, basically he reminds her that it wouldn't have kept happening because Stefan unalived Maddie on Monday. She's tried this really, really weak attempt at sounding like she is basically on the side with the detectives. But she failed dismally. And then what does she say? I forgot that she hadn't been found. I don't know why. Honestly, if you can't say things that are genuine, that are not going to make you look even more guilty, you're better off keeping your mouth shut. Because no parent who genuinely cares about the fact that their child is missing is going to forget that their child is missing. What this basically boils down to is I forgot that the focus here was Maddie and was so busy focusing on saving my own ass that I completely forgot about my daughter. What this means is my number one priority here is me. Oh, you're looking for a missing child? Wow, sorry, I forgot about that. The woman is unbelievable. I can promise you, no parent whose child is missing and is not involved and who actually cares about their child is going to forget that their child is missing. Sure, you can word it as, I forgot that she hadn't been found, but essentially, that still means you forgot that your child was missing. The woman is unbelievable. I have to say, I have so much respect for these two detectives right now, because they've just been going round in circles for the last 2.5 hours. She has lied to them for that entire time. They've given her a warning. You could be arrested. And yet what does she do? She still continues to lie. Not only does she still continue to lie, but she says stuff like this, which makes it pretty damn clear that her daughter is not her number one priority here.
There's no, I've asked this before, but there's no like map you guys can show me of like with a highlighted route of where he could have taken to see if I could recognize anything or suspect anything.
I can pull up a map on my phone of the areas you described and we can go through it.
Sure.
You said House of Cards?
No.
House
House
party.
game rules.
House of Cards. It's on Vine Street in Kissimmee.
By Oak Street.
There you go. That is House Game Rules. Feel free to drag the map around as you please.
That's all budget, oh my god.
And realistically, Florida has a lot of wetlands, so anything you see that's green may not necessarily be wooded, just may be rural, but we're looking more for where you think based off of his route, not necessarily just like the green parts of the map.
Yeah. In the back of House Game Rules, I have access to the lake. That is the one shop I can remember him specifically naming that he was going to that Monday. He said House Game Rules. Did he make it there? I don't know. if we ever went down 192 together, it would typically be in this direction towards 535 towards Disney. That's why I find it really strange that you guys say St. Cloud, because I've never gone into St. Cloud with him before.
So after this big mess up by Jen of saying that she'd essentially forgot Maddie was missing, you get silence. The detectives are waiting. It's still her move. So you get a sigh from Jen because she doesn't know where to go from here, because she was waiting to get her cues from them, essentially. And their silence has thrown her off. Finally, she wants to see a map. But the problem with that is that she's once again focusing on stores. But now, instead of being like, oh, I have this list of stores that he told me, now she claims he only told her one store. Which I'd be interested to know if that just happens to be the furthest store from St. Cloud. Could be an interesting mapping exercise to try and get that list of all the stores that she mentions through the videos and see if that one is actually furthest from St. Cloud. Because they're still waiting for a decent response from there. So, realising that they're not buying that one either, she goes back to talking about places that her and Stefan have been together. Not places where he might know of, places where he might have gone, places he might know of, but places they've been together. And the highlight here is towards Disney. Go and look towards Disney. Because I've never gone into St. Cloud with him before. Don't look at St. Cloud, because I've never been there with him, so he couldn't possibly have taken Maddie there. Honestly, this woman seems to think that she is smarter than the detectives. Don't look at St. Cloud, go look down at Northport. Or don't look at St. Cloud, go look at these stores. Because who doesn't hide a body in a store? Or don't look at St. Cloud, how about if you go and look somewhere near Disney? Essentially, they have told her, they've made it so clear multiple times now that St. Cloud is the most likely location for where he's probably taken Maddie. And she's still trying to steer them away from St. Cloud. In my eyes, that is a massive, massive red flag.
So you told me you have a friend in St. Cloud.
I do.
I don't know if he knows, but explain to him where she lives, who she is. Explain that relationship to him, because I don't think he's aware of it.
No.
Oh, okay. So one of my really good friends lives off of Old Canoe Creek Road, off Nolte.
Okay.
I don't know what neighborhood though. She's one of my really good friends. She's somebody I know that lives in St. Cloud. She's one of like two people I know that live in St. Cloud. She's hung out with us, as in me and Stefan before. She's come over to hang out with me, and Stefan would be hanging out there too, so we would all kind of hang out together. But yeah, she's just a friend.
And you're 100% sure he's never been to her house?
Yes.
So, they're onto her. She's being so careful to steer them away from St. Cloud which obviously makes you want to look closer at what she knows about St. Cloud. So they ask her about friends in St. Cloud. And what does she do? She brings up the friend who lives way away from the location where Maddie actually is. The friend who lives over on the other side of St. Cloud, which happens to be an area that is far more heavily populated, not close to any lakes, highly unlikely that there's anywhere near there that he could have taken Maddie. And I have shown this in another one of my videos, and I won't go into showing maps and everything in this video because we're focusing on what's happening here in the interview. So she's talking about Old Canoe Road, which is really close to the highway. It's not an isolated area. It's not a likely area for where he would have taken Maddie. And she's really pushing this particular friend. You know, she's a good friend. She's a really good friend. She's one of two people I know in St. Cloud. But let's get back to this friend again. She's hung out with us all. You know, basically she's interacted with Stefan. So Stefan knows she exists. So let's look at her, since you want to talk about St. Cloud. Let's not talk about the other friend in St. Cloud.
Do they have their own friendship? Or is it just, that's your friend and the only time he ever talks to her or hangs out with her is with you?
Exactly. Just my friend, and he would talk when she was around.
And you just told me about the second person in St. Cloud. Who is that?
Somebody I haven't seen in a long time. Her name is Courtney Brackman. She lives, can you pull up the map?
Mm-hmm.
But he's never been over to her house either.
Search.
She lives somewhere in this area over here. Around here. Lake Lizzy to me is familiar. I would go hiking there often. Well,
There's a
A few-
preserve there.
yeah, a few years ago, we would go hiking all the time with my friend Courtney, the one who lives right by there.
With Stefan?
No, Stefan would never come.
Now, would you tell him you're going to Lake Lizzy Preserve?
I've mentioned it before, yeah, on the phone.
Okay.
So you'll notice that when she brings up this other friend, he has to actually prompt her to talk about this friend. And you get her going, there's a bit of a delay there. She's pausing. She's deliberately stalling here. And then she comes out with, well, I haven't seen her in a really long time. That is definitely her way of saying, yeah, don't look at her because, you know, it's been so long since I've seen her, so let's not consider her. And then she has to throw in, and he's not been to her house either. So, you know, this friend, don't look at her because it's a long time since I've seen her. And no, he's not been to her house either, like this other friend whose address I pretty much gave you. And then we get the vagueness over where she lives. Oh, she lives somewhere in here. And this is when she offers up Lake Lizzy. Oh, this one rings a bell. We've talked about this one before. It's that whole drip feed thing that's going on with Jen. They're really having to push hard to get any sort of information out of her. Now, I suspect that the reason she was suddenly very enthusiastic about pointing out Lake Lizzy was because she knew Maddie wasn't there. And I really can't help thinking that given that where Maddie ended up was essentially en route to Lake Lizzy, that the plan actually had been for him to take Maddie to Lake Lizzy. But because he had the flat tyre, that didn't happen. So Jen can quite comfortably offer that up now to make it sound like she is being cooperative. Of course, what do we get from the detective? Why was that not in your top 5 places? And that is such a legitimate, such a good question. Because if your child is missing, you're going to rack your brain for every possible location that your child could be. And when you've had several days of knowing that apparently detectives believe your on-again, off-again boyfriend is responsible for your child being missing, then you should be racking your brain in terms of all the possible places he could have been. Jen's had time to think about this and consider Lake Lizzy as an option. Heck, how many times did she talk about woods and gators and lakes? And yet only now does she think of Lake Lizzy? Is she actually trying to deflect again away from this friend that lives in Hickory Tree Road? Does she actually know that that's the location where he left Maddie? And that's why, having been asked about this other friend, she skips past that friend straight on to Lake Lizzy. Like, let's not look at this friend. I haven't seen her for a long time. He's never been to her house. She lives somewhere around here, but oh look, let's look at Lake Lizzy instead.
When we talked about St. Cloud and he had asked for your top 5 places, why did this ever cross your mind?
Lake Lizzy?
Any of these places in St. Cloud that you're familiar with?
I mentioned them the first time St. Cloud was brought up. I mentioned my 2 friends that live there. And then, I don't know if I ever mentioned Lake Lizzy.
So he calls her out over it not being in this list that, top 5 places. And she comes out with, well, the first time St. Cloud was brought up, I did mention my friends. Although I don't think I mentioned Lake Lizzy. When she mentions her friends previously, when St. Cloud was brought up, she pretty much brushed it off. Oh, I've got friends out there, but they're my friends, they're not her friends. I can't remember what she said, but I do know that she brushed it off pretty quickly and essentially gave the impression that, yeah, don't look at them because they've got nothing to do with Stefan. And again, she redirects focus back to Lake Lizzy. I don't think I mentioned Lake Lizzy before. In other words, yeah, don't worry about those two friends. Let's now look at Lake Lizzy.
Not sure.
Do you know if Lake Lizzy was special?
She did enjoy going out there.
Was she verbal about that? Like, did she make that known to you guys?
She always told me that if we were to go hiking out there, to let her know, because I've gone hiking without her. I want to go. But it's been a really long time since I've done a hike down Lake Lizzy with her.
Okay.
It's been at least 2 years. Yeah, those are the only places in St. Cloud that I would know, that I could think of, that he might be aware of, but
But your gut tells us no.
Lake Lizzy, probably not. Like, does he even remember what the name of Lake Lizzy is? Probably not.
Now, I think he's testing her out when he asks her if Lake Lizzy was special to Maddie. Because she's talking about her and Maddie going for hikes at Lake Lizzy. Not Maddie and Stefan, or her and Stefan and Maddie. Just her and Maddie. So, I think what he's trying to do here is, for starters, trigger a reaction from her, an emotional reaction about Maddie being gone, but also test her out. If she's going to push Lake Lizzy, and she says that Lake Lizzy is a special place for Maddie, then the focus is back on her again. Because Lake Lizzy is more significant to Jen than it is to Stefan. And I think he's testing that out there. In terms of, if Jen is still trying to convince them that Lake Lizzy is the way to go, is it because she's told Stefan to take Maddie there? And the second question there is, if they happen to find Maddie at Lake Lizzy, is there a connection in Jen's mind that would have been the reason that Maddie's there? So, obviously, asking her if Lake Lizzy is important to Maddie isn't going to show you Stefan's brain, isn't going to show you a motivation for him taking Maddie there, because it has no significance for him. And she admits, yes, she liked going out there. She always told me to let her know if I went hiking out there. And then she dismisses them in sort of, well, they're the only places in St. Cloud that I know of that he might be aware of. And while she's saying that, or at some point in time, it's like I said, the audio and the visual aren't quite synced. But while this discussion is going on, originally she's focusing on the map on the phone, but she's not looking at the detectives. And then as this whole thing progresses, she actually shifts herself backwards, away from the map, away from the detectives. And that's when he's saying to her, but your gut tells you no. So I think he was reading her body language there. And her body language was probably saying, yeah, Lake Lizzy is not the place to look. which we know is the truth. And like I said, of all the places, all the 3 places in St. Cloud, what is the one place she's brushed over? The place closest to where Maddie actually was located. She's tried to emphasise Lake Lizzy, and her body language has essentially given her away and said, no, don't look at Lake Lizzy. I suspect there was probably more in her facial language as well that we can't see for him to ask her, your gut tells you no. Of course, it's also quite likely that in terms of the surveillance footage they have of Stefan heading into that area, they have quite possibly calculated, based on his trip back there in the Nissan, how far in he could have possibly gone. Harder to calculate with the flat tyre, because in terms of how long it takes a person to change a tyre, there's so many variables. If you've not changed a tyre on your car for a while, then chances are those wheel nuts are going to be stuck solid. And it's going to take a bit of work for you to loosen them before you can even jack the car up. So it's harder to gauge a time frame knowing that he's had a flat tyre along there somewhere. So they probably looked at the surveillance from the Nissan and said, this is the furthest he could have gotten. And they probably realised that he couldn't have gotten as far as Lake Lizzy. That's just a bit of speculation there. But it certainly seems that there's something going on here that we're missing that makes the detective say to her, but your gut doesn't tell you, Lake Lizzy. Something that he's reading in her body language, in the way she's talking, in her facial expressions, that says, don't bother with Lake Lizzy. Of course, it could also have been a fishing expedition, and by saying, but your gut tells you not Lake Lizzy, he could have been looking for any sign of relief from Jen in terms of, phew, okay, they're not going to look there now. It would be really nice to know what was going on here in that detective's mind.
Is it okay if I look up past card rules again?
Yes.
Or house rules too?
Was he into video games?
Yeah.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft, into tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer 40k, card games like Lorcana, which is a Disney card game. That's what he told me he was going to go do Monday. He was going to go look for Lorcana cards, and that's why he was going to go to House Rules Gaming. He was just going to make a few stops, and I said, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting time when we don't have money? Like, you don't have money to spend. He's like, oh, I'm just browsing. I just want to look. I want to see what they have available. That's all he said. Every time I did question him, he always had an answer.
Now, I suspect that Jen wanting to look at whatever it was she was looking at on the maps was all about stalling, trying to avoid answering more questions, because it essentially was giving her a break while she scrolled around looking at stuff on the maps. But of course, those poor detectives have been stuck in that room with her for like 2.5 hours at that point in time. So they just don't have the time or the patience to be sitting there while she's basically looking for the direction of the next wild goose chase. So we get the questioning being moved along to, is he into video games? Which of course gives her something that she can easily answer, and she's quite enthusiastic about answering it. And gives all the things that Stefan's into. Which of course allows her to segue back to, and that's what he was doing on the day that Maddie went missing. He was going to these shops to look for these cards. Okay, yeah, we've heard that story lots of times before. There's nothing new in that. Until she starts saying, and I said to him, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting time? And then she pauses. And she's like, when, little pause again, we don't have money. Does it sound familiar to you? Because to me, straight away, it brought to mind her talking about him supposedly going searching for Maddie late at night, and her saying, why did you search there? That's not where she'd be. That sort of thing. And I wonder if she's been so caught up in giving this fake narrative that she actually was still trying to give the narrative of, why are you wasting time doing that when you should be searching for Maddie? And then she catches herself, realises that, hang on, no, Maddie wasn't missing at that point in time, and dials it back to, because when we don't have the money. Why is it we don't have the money, Jen, when at that point in time you weren't even living together? It's certainly an odd comment to make. And I don't think that she actually made this comment. Again, I think this is for the benefit of the detectives. She's doing that Jen thing again of trying to prove that she's superior to Stefan, but not only that, she was the adult in the relationship. She had to basically raise 2 children in that household. If, of course, the stories are to be believed. But then, of course, she comes out with him basically telling her that, oh, he was only just browsing. And she really sounds so disdainful towards him. Like a mother who's disappointed with their child. Why did you go to the mall after school when you should have been home doing your homework? That sort of thing. But the funny thing is, she then comes out with, every time I question him, he always had an answer. So when did you question him, Jen? Because you've just told detectives before this that you let him do what he does. That you trust him. You apparently never questioned him about Maddie going missing. But now you make it sound like you question him all the time. And how does you questioning him about looking around shops, how does that equate with, I let him do what he does? Again, she's completely changing her story. And I think what it comes down to is she's just trying to come up with a story to satisfy the detectives. I doubt there's much truth in this. She's just trying to make herself look good, trying to make Stefan look bad, because if she can make it sound like she sees Stefan as a bit of a loser, and hey, look at me, I can judge Stefan, I can see that he's a loser, so clearly I couldn't have been involved or helped him out, because as you can see, I'm quite scathing towards him because of his behaviours and his attitudes. This is all new. Before, it was all about protecting Stefan. Sure, he might lie to his parents, steal from his parents, all that sort of stuff. But apparently with her, he was saintly. But now when the pressure's on, she's doing her best to separate herself from Stefan by painting him in a bad light. But honestly, I just cannot get over her saying, every time I question him, after the huge thing with this entire interview was the detectives asking, why don't you question him? I never thought to question him. Which is it, Jen?
Do you guys know, like, up until when on 182 you guys found him, see him? Like, how far down?
We just know it's St. Cloud.
So I keep thinking, like, house game rules on 192. Okay, it's got some secluded stuff in the background, or in the back of it, but it's still 182. It's still really busy. It's all really busy till you pass St. Cloud. I can't think of anything. I'm honestly at home.
So right now, I'm pretty sure they're still doing your phone. I think. How'd you get here? You're driven here?
I was driven here, but my dad followed behind. I think you guys said my car might be ready.
We'll verify that in a minute. The investigation is still going.
Yeah.
Right, Stefan also is not in charge of murder. Right, just a sexual.
He's not, or he is?
He has not been.
Oh, okay.
He's just been charged with sexual battery. I have a couple questions for you that are going to be on record. They're going to be official. I need you to answer truthfully. Because if they determine that you did answer not truthfully, you can be held accountable for it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so he's starting to wrap up the interview, and like I said, this is all out of sync. the audio and the video don't fit together right now. But we do get this reaction from her, which I'm pretty certain is the reaction when he mentioned that Stefan was not being charged with red rum. Because you could also hear in her voice that she was quite surprised. And you get this sudden reaction from her at one point in the video where you do see the eyebrows go straight up in surprise. She was expecting him to be charged with that, even though she spent the entire interview protesting his innocence and saying, I don't believe that he would do that. What if it's just an abduction? I don't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm sure Maddie's just been abducted. And yet you get this reaction from her, which obviously she can't control. The moment he says that Stefan's not been charged with red rum, which of course we know occurred later because they needed a grand jury for that, she was shocked. So how is it that you could be shocked when you're claiming that they were looking at the wrong person? Now, for this last part where he gets her to raise her hand, I'm going to try to do an overlay of the video in a way that the video should come close to matching the audio. Because I think it's important for us to try and see what's going on with her face as he's asking her each of these questions while she's got her hand raised up. And yes, that's the Chihuahua going bonkers because I've worked a bit late this afternoon or this evening now, and he wants attention. I'm keen to get this finished, so now he's pestering Taka, as he loves to do. So let's see what we can do in terms of getting the audio and the video synced up for this last bit to see what's going on with Jen's face.
Your right hand. Do you swear that everything we talked about today in this interview is true and correct?
Yes.
Did you lie to me or the detective at any time?
No.
Okay. Do you currently know, or have you ever been aware of where his body has been since Monday?
No.
Did you have any?
No.
Were you aware at any time, whether it be the most recent instance or the first instance, accusation sexually by Stefan? Okay. At this time, you do not know where Stefan went on 192?
I don't.
You do not know where he went in Northport?
I do not.
And you have at no time this week had any conversations with Stefan where he disclosed what he did?
No.
Okay. The story that we talked about of what at one point we discussed that she could potentially have been in a trunk on the way to Northport.
Yeah,
Is that information you know to be true or an assumption?
an assumption.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us before we go check on the phone in the car? We may not be able to answer everything, but if you have questions, we can see if we can answer those questions.
So the main things I'm seeing from her while he's questioning her here is her sucking in her lips, sucking in her cheeks, and there's a few instances where her mouth goes kind of sideways. Here's what I think I saw, but I'm really interested in hearing your observations because you may have spotted things that I haven't, or you may see things differently from how I'm seeing it. Yes, it is crazy hour right now. The pup wants to play. I'm keen to finish this. Let's just pester Taka instead. Honestly, she has the patience of a saint. So he asks her if everything she's said is true and correct. And you get both the cheeks and the lips sucked in after she says yes. So I'm guessing that's a big fat no. And then he asks her if she is currently aware of or know where Maddie's body has been since Monday. And she sucks her cheeks in. She says no. She sucks her cheeks in. She sucks in her bottom lip. And then she pops it back out again. I think she's aware of her facial expressions at this point in time. And possibly trying not to be quite so obvious. I think the third question was if she had anything to do with Maddie's end. And I don't see any reaction from her lips or cheeks or anything there when she says no. And let's be honest, even if you could say her sending Maddie upstairs with Stefan was essentially having something to do with Maddie's end, Jen wouldn't see it that way. For her, unless she had physically ended Maddie herself, she would consider that she had nothing to do with it. Now, when he asks her if she was aware of the SA stuff, she says no. But kind of through the side of her mouth. There's a bit of a reaction there going on from Jen. I didn't see the lips get sucked in or the cheeks get sucked in. But the fact that she gets that sideways look on her face, so the no then off to the side, says to me that there's something about this question that causes some disdain from her. I wonder if in her mind it's not SA. Because remember, at one point in time, when she was talking about having seen the images, she claimed, yeah, she sure Maddie gave him a BJ, but that wasn't the R word. Is it that in her mind it's not SA? Is that why you get this sideways, this look of disdain on her face? Is this about anger towards Maddie for the whole Woody Allen situation? Is that what she's thinking? Is she blaming Maddie here? So even though we're not seeing a reaction that would suggest that she's lying about saying that she doesn't know about the SA, to me, that is basically, it could be that she's oblivious, but based on everything we've heard, I honestly believe that what's going on in her mind here is that she's blaming Maddie for it still. In her mind, it's not SA, it's a Woody Allen situation. So she's not lying because it's not SA. But there's definitely some disdain there. Something about that whole situation she doesn't like. So, moving on from that, he asks her about about Northport. Do you know where he went at Northport? She says, I do not. And I swear, she nearly swallowed her lips after saying that. Which, of course, suggests to me that she really did know what happened when he went down to Northport. Then the next question, basically, did he disclose to her what he did? We get no, and we get the bottom lip sucked in, and it appears like the mouth goes a little bit sideways as well. To me, that says, I think that he probably did tell her what he did. And I think she's probably PO'd at him just because of the inconvenience to her. And the fact that this has dumped her in a whole pile of duty. Because she's never shown any concern for Maddie. So whatever it is that's got that sideways thing going on with her mouth, I think it's more about her thinking, yeah, because he completely effed up, he's a loser. And then when he asks her about her story, about Maddie possibly being in the trunk and Stefan going to Northport, and is that info true or an assumption? As he's repeating the story, you see her suck her lips in. And, like, she assures him, it's just an assumption. But what she does is that she actually opens her mouth and tucks her lips in to her mouth. And while her lips are in her mouth, she gets this sideways look with her mouth. So, there's definitely more to the story here. And I can't help thinking that essentially it's more than an assumption. It's based on her knowing that Maddie was in the trunk of the Lincoln at one point in time. Could also be disdain that maybe that was supposed to be the plan, that he was meant to go back and collect Maddie and take her down to Northport, and he screwed up. So maybe the disdain is aimed at him. Who knows? But there's definitely more going on there with her response in terms of this thing about the trunk and saying it was just an assumption. Now, obviously, when you are reading someone's face like that, it is highly, highly subjective. So I'm looking forward to hearing your take on that and hearing your thoughts on her reactions to each of those things. Because while I think I have got it lined up in that instance with the video and the audio, at the same time, seeing the reactions and trying to interpret what the reactions mean other than just at a very basic level is challenging. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on what we were just watching just there.
It's not your only opportunity. Your only opportunity phase was you saying you swear.
Yeah.
Good. Lastly, the only opportunity, you obviously have numerous detectives' phone numbers, you're gonna have numerous agencies' phone numbers, things like that, so realistically, there will be other options for you to ask questions.
I don't think I have questions right now.
Okay. I don't want you to think I was purposely an asshole to you.
No, I know. You're
Alright?
doing your job.
Like I told you, like the sheriff's probably reached out. You've been in communication with numerous people here. Those are my opinions and my opinions only. They don't reflect Sheriff Mina, the chief of PD, Kyle, any other detectives who talked to you. Alright? I personally don't know. Alright? We will be here all weekend. We will be here all night. My only hope is that you truthfully did not lie to us. You truthfully don't know where she was. And that you truthfully did not know what was happening to her.
He's making it pretty clear here that he does not believe her. He's making it clear that he's pretty certain she has lied to him. And he's giving her that option of, this is not the end. You can choose to speak to someone if you want to tell them something. Meanwhile, he's given her the option of asking questions, and of course she's got no questions. Why would you have questions when your daughter's missing? Okay, so there's a large chunk of the video here where the detectives have basically left the room to organise things, and you just get Jean kind of just flopping around on the couch, not doing anything of great interest. So I'm going to pull all that out, just remove all that. But what I am going to do is the last part where they come back into the room, I'm going to try and once again match up the video and the audio as closely as possible, because we get that one section when he's just doing all the admin stuff basically when he comes back in, wants to know contact numbers, tells her about you can get your car back, but we have to keep your phone until it's been properly downloaded, all that sort of stuff. But the thing that I want to see in hopefully lined up video and audio is when he asks her where she's going to be staying or something along those lines, and she does the Jean tears, staying with Stephanie because I don't think I'll ever go back to the townhouse. So I just want to look at that in sync.
So here's where we're at right now. Your car is obviously able to be released to you, the Nissan. It requires us to do some paperwork because we did log it into our system. So now that it's in our system, we got to release it properly to you, which is no big deal. It'll take a couple minutes. Because of the high profile. All right, I know you said we can download your phone, and I do appreciate your cooperation with that. But because the same way we did with Stefan and every other phone and digital device we've seized, they're making us write a search warrant on it, which really doesn't affect you too much. The search warrant is a legal thing. It's not a you thing. It's not a trust thing. But with that, it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
All right, so I can release your car to you right now. We can go facilitate that downstairs. I cannot make you a promise that that phone will be downloaded by the time your car's ready. What I can promise you is at the moment it is downloaded, if you have left from here, I will bring it to you. You're staying with your sister still? Does anybody have your sister's phone number that we can make sure we can communicate with you on?
Yeah. My dad is downstairs, I think, waiting for me, so I can give you my dad's number since he'll be
Whatever
with me.
phone numbers we can have, just to make sure that
Yeah.
if we are unable to give you the phone back today,
Yeah.
throw my shit out there. That way, if we are unable to give you the phone back, we at least are able to contact you, and we want to make sure you have a phone to contact us if something arises. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, for sure.
What's Dad's number? What's his name?
My dad's name is and if you can't get a hold of him, you can take my sister's number. She's
Are you gonna be going back to your condo? Or are you gonna go to
I don't think I'm returning to my townhouse ever again. I don't want to. I want to be staying with my sister.
So what we'll do is we will walk you out this back parking lot. If the car is in the back corner, so I'll walk with you. We'll go through the back, so we don't go through the front lobby. There was a press conference today. Obviously, none of us got to see what was said. I assume it's just an update. But we will go through the back to go get the car, and that way we are not walking through the front lobby making you wait out there. I don't know if there's still media present. I assume you're not in the state or mood to go walk past 32 news cameras. So we will go out the back and get the car, and I'll show you how you can leave here, and we can call your dad from the back so he can know where to go or where to meet you.
Yeah.
We just tell him, hey, she's gonna be in the back parking lot. You can drive around. You guys can follow each other out, or whatever you choose to do that way. All right.
Okay, it did sound like there might have been a sniff or two in there when she's like, I don't think I'll ever go back to the condo. And we see her pushing her glasses up and rubbing her eyes. So maybe there was a tear or two there for her. But it could that just be that her whole world has just crumbled because she knows Stefan's not coming back. And maybe there is a little part of her that cares for Maddie. I don't know. Maybe it's that whole thing of suddenly she's got nowhere to live. Because either way, associations with that condo aren't going to be good. Whatever it is, she got over it pretty damn quickly. So that finally brings us to the end of this marathon interview. I haven't come away from this feeling any kind of thoughts towards Jen. Let me put it that way. There's nothing here that to me is a saving grace for her. If anything, it just shows me that my assessments of her are not as cruel, as unjust as sometimes I question myself over. Because I do sometimes wonder, am I being unfair on this woman who's lost a child? And then I watch things like this interview and I think she's not doing any of the things that she should be doing. She's not acting like a parent who is genuinely concerned about her child being missing. She's not acting like a parent who had no idea what was going on. And I have seen people pop up occasionally with comments in my videos, something like, wow, you know, you're just so harsh on Jen, I'm out of here. Which does make me stop and question if I am being harsh, if I am being unfair. But when I look at all the times that I've done deep dives on Jen, all the things I've looked at with relation to her, I still come to exactly the same conclusion. And that is that I can't see how she could not have known what was going on under her roof. Not only that, she says things which make it seem impossible that she couldn't have been oblivious to what was going on. And I do believe that she knew what Stefan had done to Maddie, and that she helped him figure out how to cover up. Their stories match too much, and the bulk of this interview was lies from Jen or avoidance. So on that note, I'm going to finish there. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments on this video and your comments overall, like on the overall interview, now that we've gotten through this whole thing. I'm going to do the derivative use interview after this, because I think we've just done so many deep dives over the last week or so that it will be really interesting to revisit the derivative use based on these, based on the jail calls, and just see what we think. So on that note, as I said at the start of the video, if you're new to my channel and you like what you hear, please subscribe. It helps me out immensely. Also, please hit the like button. Please leave a comment below. Leave lots of comments if you like. I've said this before, comments are gold. Never apologise for leaving too many comments. There's no such thing as too many comments. It makes a lot more work for me, but I don't mind that. So leave comments. Let me know your thoughts. Correct me if you think I've misinterpreted things, if I've got things slightly wrong. I love when I do have to stop and think about my opinions, and I love when there is people who challenge that, because it helps us as a community gain a better understanding. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I begin to wonder